Hello and welcome to Capital Week with David Owen. I'm Dirk Lammers of Cetera Services, joined again by David Owen, president of the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It looks like you're going to great steps to make sure we kick off this week's episode with an interesting story about another area of the South Dakota capital. Let's see what you got, David.
We've chosen for this background another rather pedestrian scene. This is the Grand Staircase. I'm standing on the second floor. This is the floor of the rotunda. If I were to point the camera straight up, you would see the interior of the dome. This is the main staircase that goes up to third floor, and that's where the House and Senate chambers are. This is also where the governor starts the Grand March after being inaugurated, and it is one of those ceremonial parts of changing of government that we do, or doing a reinstallation for a governor's second term during the governor's inaugural ball. There's one thing interesting about this staircase. When you go up to the top on this side, you will notice, if you look carefully at those vertical establishments, which are called balusters, you'll notice one of them is upside down. When you read the self-guided tour, they say that is an example of keeping us humble. The story they tell during the guided tour is that the craftsman working on that set of balusters got chewed out one day and he was ticked. So he put it in upside down to see if anybody'd notice. Been 100+ years. Very few people notice, but if you're at the Capitol, take a look. It's kind of fun.
Wonderful story. And this past Thursday was crossover day, with each bill needing to pass its chamber of origin by the end of the legislative day.
We've had some fun with the definition of a legislative day through the history of South Dakota being a state. The Constitution only allows a given number of legislative days. That number has changed through the years, but now it can be no more than 40. But back when I was in high school, and we won't worry about what decade that was, they used to consider a legislative day to technically end at midnight because that's a day. We have since, I think through court rulings, decided the legislature can define day as anything they want. But when it was midnight, they would go through a ceremonial covering of the clock. And so they'd hang a coat, they'd hang a fabric over the clock inside the chambers so nobody knew what time it was and they could continue their work. It's always been ceremonial fun. Hasn't been done for a long time. And I heard Friday morning by those that stayed until after midnight that out of honoring tradition, the majority leader of the House covered the clock so that they continue. I also heard they adjourned about 12:06.
Let's light up this broadcast with the marijuana bill. In November, South Dakota voters passed an initiated measure that would make medical marijuana legal as of July 1st. But HB 1100 sought to delay that implementation date by a year. I understand there was a compromise here. What are the details of that?
Well, if you want to light it up, I'm going to tell you medical marijuana is perilously close to going up in smoke, just to continue some really bad jokes. House Bill 1100 was the governor's idea to do exactly what you said, push back the implementation of medical marijuana for an entire year. I can tell you, talking to legislators, that they are hearing from many people back home who are intensely objecting to this. The objections tend to run along two lines. One, we've been talking about medical marijuana forever. We finally voted on it. You can't put it off that long. And two, for those that really follow this process, it's like they repealed an initiative several years ago. Nobody remembers what it was, but they know they did that. They've taken Amendment A to court to try to get it declared unconstitutional. And now they're trying to back up on the deal that the voters told them by 70% that they wanted with medical marijuana. So the bill was taken up as part of that late night session Thursday night, and they made a change. They have pushed it back 6 months to January 1st, 2022, and that gives them a little extra time. To defend the administration a little bit, I've talked to the Secretary of Revenue. He studied other states. Implementing this isn't as simple as people think, and so that time frame fits what other states have done. So now this will go over and see what the senators think.
And what was the decision on HB 1225, which would have let convenience stores sell recreational pot?
Well, as predicted, that bill died in front of the House Taxation Committee. Mike Derby, representative out of Rapid City, Republican, who's actually one of the legislators that's returned to pick up a career in the House, has led what gets called the Cannabis Caucus. I haven't gone to any of the meetings. I don't think they're handing out samples, but they have done a pretty good job of teaching legislators about the topic, about what states have done that have legal marijuana. This was an attempt to use people that are used to carding folks. This is for recreational marijuana, which is in the courts. So Representative Derby knew that his bill was dead when he walked in. He wasn't just giving a eulogy at his own funeral. He was one of the pallbearers, but did a really nice job of saying, here it is, when we're ready, this is kind of the start. Now, on the substance of it, using people with malt liquor licenses, there's about 2,400 convenience stores. The bill said it has to be South Dakota owned, so that's 1,000. In the view of the South Dakota Chamber, that's way too many places selling recreational marijuana. We're looking for dispensaries or pot shops to be way more limited than that. So this is not a concept we'll embrace. But I think that caucus and that group of people deserves credit for starting our educational process, because the idea of recreational marijuana isn't going up in smoke.
Let's move on to the triple crown of sports betting bills. What direction did the legislature go on these?
No triple crown this year. The winner, as expected, is the governor by winning her race. Her bill, Senate Bill 44, which will only allow sports betting in the city of Deadwood, actually in a casino, will pass through the legislature. The other two bills, 1211, which would have let you bet in places with a full liquor license, think restaurants, bars, sports bars, oddly enough. That went down in state affairs on a vote of 9-4 early in the week. And House Bill 1231, which lets you bet on your phone, a tablet, while you're sitting at your kid's basketball game, or as they chronically complained, sitting in church. That bill died its House Tax Committee on a vote of 11-1. So the other two bills are gone. The governor's is the only one. And as everybody has said, we need something to pass if we're going to be able to legally bet on sports activities in South Dakota. So you'll be able to bet on the Super Bowl of the future, but you're driving to you're driving to Deadwood to do it.
HB 1247 sought to provide for the protection of the consciences of medical professionals. What was this bill, and what happened here?
This is one of the bills that's popular among the very conservative, social conservatives, who are worried that a nurse might be compelled to participate in an abortion or in another procedure that violates the moral stance, religious stance. The bill allowed for something broader than known religious standards or dogma, and made it consciousness of ethics or your personal kind of opinions. The problem with the bill, in the opinion of the medical community, at least the hospital systems and the South Dakota Chamber, was it duplicates Title VII. Health systems deal with these kinds of objections every day. Larger systems are easier to accommodate, but it really provided an extreme level of protection that was inappropriate, would almost make some medical providers immune from medical malpractice suits. We thought it was duplicative. We thought it was overreaching. It did emerge early in the week from State Affairs Committee on a vote of 8-5. Honestly, I think most of us thought the House would vote for it. Past few years, the House has embraced very conservative concepts that have not done as well in the Senate. But with a fairly diligent effort on the House floor by a coalition of groups, quite honestly led by Justin Smith, a contract lobbyist out of Sioux Falls, um, the floor vote came up short. There was 25 in favor, 41. So that bill has died in the House.
Okay, the title of House Bill 1217, sponsored by Representative Rhonda Milstead, said it aims to promote continued fairness in women's sports. Now, opponents say it's an anti-trans bill dealing with a problem that just doesn't exist here in South Dakota. What's the story here, and how have legislators voted so far?
Well, this is another one of the social conservative agenda, and the proponents talk about the innate advantage men have over women in sports. What the proponents have masterfully done is create an impression that high school boys will start saying they're girls so that they can win tournaments, they can be state champions. And one of their favorite phrases is, unless we pass this, we won't have women's sports. We'll have men's sports and co-ed, because guys are going to go flood all of the women's teams. The proponents are striking fear in people, suggesting that it's going to become a widespread practice for young men to join the women's teams so that they can be champions. This is an exaggeration that borders on irresponsible. This bill, in fact, is an anti-transgender. It forces people to say, hey, you're a boy, you're a girl, or we have co-ed teams. And it sets a condition for determining whether you're a boy or a girl that has nothing to do with what we've learned about people's identity, and the handful of people, the small number of people that face situations that we now have described as transgender. In South Dakota, this issue is taken care of by the State High School Association, who can tell you about the cases that we faced. Everybody in the school systems believes that they've handled it really well on a case-by-case basis. The proponents like to talk about a situation in Connecticut that involves 2 or 3 young trans students. That's in court. It's way too early for us to pass this kind of bill. What the chamber objects to is that these blanket kind of bills that discriminate against a class of people, in this case, transgender youth, granted, not a large class of people, but we're just issuing a blanket statement that says, you're not welcome. We don't care about what your needs might be. These are the kinds of bills that have economic consequences of canceled conventions, canceled entertainment, NCAA sanctions, other sports leagues canceling tournaments. In dispute is what happened in North Carolina. They had NCAA tournaments canceled. They had conventions canceled. What the proponents like to do to kind of ignore and get all that to go away is they talk about the economic growth in North Carolina having not suffered while you're talking about the whole state. Fact is, they lost tournaments. They lost significant amount of opportunities for tourism. South Dakota does not want to do that, especially by passing bills where we create the impression that we're not in an inclusive employment environment, or we're not an inclusive society. This came out of State Affairs 11-2 and passed the floor 50 to 17. So this is one of those cases where the discussion will continue over in the Senate during the last 2 weeks of the session.
Senate Bill 155 would appropriate $40 million for housing development in cities with less than 100,000 population and $10 million each for housing development projects in Minnehaha and Pennington counties. Where is this in the process?
Well, first, as a piece of background, workforce is still the number one issue faced by employers in South Dakota. Having enough workers with the right skills. Closely related to that is some communities simply don't have enough housing, period. Other ones don't have housing in the affordable range, or in the case of a couple communities, are in a situation where they have affordable housing, but they need that move-up housing so that people can create vacancies in the affordable housing. Senate Bill 155 honestly started out as a bill that Rapid City and Sioux Falls were trying to solve their unique housing situations, and it started out at a much lower dollar amount. Then some of the smaller communities started saying, you know, we have some unique needs as well. So the governor told us during Business Day that she was very proud that her administration had started using the READY Fund for housing projects, and points to Watertown as a very successful development using those revolving funds in the READY Fund account. So as we went through last week, a lot of discussions about how to structure this money. Those decisions are ongoing, but we now have $40 million for communities less than 100,000, as you said. That money goes to GOED. There's talk, but the bill doesn't specifically say into the READY Fund, but that block of money will have different rules and conditions than $10 million for Minnehaha County and $10 million for Pennington County, which are designed for Sioux Falls and Rapid City. This is the investment we're making with some of that tremendous largesse that we have here because of federal COVID economic recovery money. And this is one of the specific investments you're seeing actually take shape and move.
Well, that's another edition of Capitol Week with David Owen. We're here every Monday during the legislative session. Please like and share below, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, David.
I look forward to next week.